This is a letter that never arrived. But perhaps it is still waiting for someone. Dear Anna, if you are reading this, then I am not back. The cabin where I hide seems forgotten by time itself. It has no owner, no name, no mark to identify it. It stands there as if it had sprouted from the cold earth, surrounded by layers of snow and solitude. The boards are old, gray and creak in the wind, as if they tell stories of other absences that have passed through here. There is a strange peace in this isolation, a dense stillness, which I don't know whether it comforts or haunts. It stands on the edge of a sleeping forest, where tall, leafless trees stretch out their branches like arms that no longer have anyone to wave to. At night, these same trees whisper in the wind, as if they were talking to each other about the secrets of the world that we humans will never understand. When it snows, everything becomes even calmer. The sound dissolves into the air, as if the world breathes more slowly, more carefully. Here, even the silence seems to have thickness. It gathers in the corners of the cabin, settles on the furniture, and nestles inside me. The front door is crooked, held together by tired hinges that groan whenever I move it. There is a small window covered by a faded linen curtain, where I often rest my gaze as I try to remember what her face looked like in the sunlight. The glass is cracked at the bottom corner, and sometimes when the wind blows from the north, little snowflakes escape inside, as if they wanted to take part in what is happening inside, which, in fact, is almost nothing. The interior of the cabin is simple. 2 wooden chairs, a table with a worn top, a narrow bed with thin covers. In one corner, an old cast iron stove, where I try to light a fire every night, with more hope than success. Damp wood produces more smoke than heat, but even the attempt is comforting. There is something alive in the ember that survives, as if it were the last witness to a flame that also burns within me. The wide planked floor creaks beneath my footsteps, betraying every movement. I don't care anymore if someone came looking for me. I might not even run. The loneliness is so present that an unfamiliar sound would almost be welcome. And yet, there's a certain care in my gestures. I do everything slowly. The days pass too slowly, and time here doesn't seem to know where to go. It hovers. In the mornings, I often sit by the window, a blanket draped over my shoulders, watching the branches bend under the weight of the snow. It's a silent spectacle, nature surrendering to the cold with a grace that moves me. Sometimes a little bird appears, balancing on a beam on the roof. It stays there for a few seconds, as if watching over me, or perhaps just reminding me that the world still exists out there, that there is life beyond these walls of wood and ice. The nights are too long, dark. The lamp I found on a shelf casts a flickering yellow light, which draws shadows on the walls and keeps me company. It is in this light that I write, that I speak to you, even without knowing if my words will ever reach you. I write because, somehow, I feel less lost when I think of you reading this, even if it is a dream, even if it is just an echo inside. My head The predominant smell here is of old wood and coal. Yes, cold has a smell. It smells of wind, of stone, of absence. Sometimes I open the door just to feel the air come in and remind myself that I am still in the world, even if isolated from it. There is no road, no marked trail, just the snow covering everything like a blanket of silence. I walked for hours to get here without leaving a trace. And now the way back has been erased by time. At the back of the cabin, there is a small shelf with objects left by someone who lived here before me. A book with yellowed pages, a wooden comb, an enameled iron mug. I touch these objects with respect, as if touching relics. I wonder who used them. Was he also waiting for someone? Did he also write letters that were never read? The cabin has a soul. There's no other way to put it. It listens to me. When I speak softly, I feel the walls absorb my words with affection. When I cry, the wind seems to blow softer, as if to lull me. When I sleep, the creaking of the roof reminds me that I am protected not from the world, but from myself. And sometimes, that's enough. Every night before I go to sleep, I place your photograph on the table and leave the letter I am writing next to it. It is a way of making your absence less cold. With each line, I feel like I am rebuilding you a little bit, not just as you were, but as I wish you were still. I don't know how long I will be here. Maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe the whole winter. But as long as I have paper and ink and the memory of your name, I will keep writing. And even if no one reads it, even if this letter never reaches you, these words will be kept in this place, in this silent cabin where time has forgotten to pass and where love still has space to resist the snow. Sometimes I wonder if memory is really a place, or just a reflection of what we wish it were. The port of Bergen that day still lives inside me with an almost cruel clarity, not as a complete memory, but as a set of fragments that repeat themselves in slow motion, as if time refused to let that moment go away. And maybe I'll refuse too. We were close to the old pier, the strong wind blowing small needles of mist and salt at us. The city far behind seemed to have shrunk. Under the gray sky, there was the sound of seagulls, of ship bells, and the echo of hurried footsteps of other farewells. But around us, everything seemed suspended. You are wearing that gray-blue coat, the same one you wore when we walked through the hills behind. Your house. The raised collar hid part of your face, but your eyes were lighter that day. Maybe because of the light, maybe because of the sadness, or both. I remember you were holding a handkerchief in your hand. Your fingers were shaking, but you didn't say anything, and neither did I. We stood there, facing each other, as if trying to memorize every line of each other's faces, every shadow, every sigh. There were no promises. There were no grand phrases, just the weight of what didn't need to be said. When the ship's whistle sounded, so low and drawn out that it seemed to come from a place deeper than the sea, you took a step forward. That's when you hugged me, not like someone saying goodbye, but like someone who hasn't yet learned to let go. His face was against my shoulder, and I could smell him a faint mixture of lavender and coal, something that always reminded me of ordinary days, the ones that seemed insignificant until they were no more. His arms around me were too tight, as if they could hold back time. I didn't want to move, not even breathing. Deep down, we knew that that moment would be repeated 1,000 times within us, that it would be relived on lonely nights, in unsent letters, in gestures interrupted by distance. You cried silently, your tears hid in the collar of my uniform, and I pretended not to notice, because if I said a word, my voice would fail too. I still remember the sound of your heart racing against my chest, as if it were the only living thing in the middle of a world that stopped. You whispered something, so quietly that to this day I'm not sure if I heard it or imagined it. Maybe it was my name. Maybe it was back. Maybe it was just a hiccup wanting to turn into hope. The hug lasted seconds or centuries. My body still carries the memory of that contact, the delicate pressure of your fingers on my back, the brief warmth between our skins on a day too cold for love. It was like I could hide inside you for a moment, as if, for a few seconds, the whole world was outside that embrace, and we inside. When we walked away, your gaze seemed more mature, calmer, as if you had kept a part of me right there, behind your eyes. You adjusted the scarf on your wrist, straightened your coat, and gave a half smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a resigned smile, like someone who understands that everything that is beautiful must, sooner or later, learn to say goodbye. We didn't kiss, and maybe it was better that way. Kisses are final. Hugs, on the other hand, know how to stay inside us. From there, I remember walking slowly to the platform. I didn't look back right away. I waited until I was far enough away that you wouldn't notice me crying too. But when I finally turned around, you were still there, alone, small, still like a statue made of wind and longing. Her white handkerchief, which she had previously held tightly, now danced loosely in her hand. He waved at me, or maybe at the void between us. And it was in that moment, in that last image of you standing on the pier, that I understood what the word absence meant. It's not when someone leaves. It's when time insists on repeating the moment when someone is still there, even after they've already left. Now, every time I close my eyes here in this cold cabin, that hug returns. It's like a memory of warmth, in a place where the cold seems eternal, and for a few seconds, the world becomes whole again. I don't know if you still remember. Perhaps he kept that moment in a forgotten corner of his soul, along with other small pains that time wraps up and hides. But I still live in that embrace. I still sleep inside it. I still write this letter as if your arms were around me. And even here, where the silence is as thick as the snow that covers the world, I can swear that sometimes when the wind blows through the crack in the window, I still smell you. I can still hear your breathing mixed with mine, as if that last hug had decided to stay. Time here does not pass its stretches. There are no clocks in the cabin, no ticking, no hands spinning in circles. Just the slow fading of light on the wood, the chill of the air, the distant sound of a twig breaking under the weight of snow. Time is no longer a straight line with a beginning, middle, and end. It behaves like a frozen lake, still on the surface, but deep, unfathomable beneath the white skin that covers it. Sometimes it feels like only minutes have passed since I wrote the last line. Other times, it feels like I've aged decades in a single afternoon. Time, when it is empty, grows. It expands until it occupies all space, and within it, longing spreads like a cold mist over the skin. There's something strange about longing, something physical. It's not just a memory, it's heavy. It presses against my chest, my shoulders, my eyelids. It lies with me at night and wakes me before dawn, when the sky is still an indecisive shade between dark and gray. There's no escaping it. Not here, and maybe not anywhere. I miss you like someone who is thirsty, like someone who is cold. It is an absence with contours, with form, as if your absence had a smell, a texture, a breath of its own. And she accompanies me with every step on this worn wood, with every creak of the house when the wind pushes the walls as if testing my resistance. Time, when unaccompanied, reveals who we are, or maybe who we stopped being. In the city, the days went by in a hurry. We had set times, appointments, voices crossed on the sidewalks. There was always something pushing us towards tomorrow. But here there is no future, no past. There is only now. And in this now, longing is the only faithful companion. She doesn't demand anything. She doesn't speak. It just remains. I think about you as regularly as I breathe. And maybe that's what hurts the most. It's not the memory of a specific moment. It's not the image of your face at the harbor, or the sound of your voice calling my name. It's the absence of all of that. It is the space left between each memory, like a frame of silence around a photograph erased by time. Time makes me realize that sometimes longing is not about what was experienced, but about what never happened. How many things do we leave for later? How many words have I held back, afraid of appearing fragile, when the only thing that could keep us strong was precisely our shared fragility? Now, as the days go by, or would it be weeks, I discover that longing also has layers. In the beginning, it was missing you, your touch, your voice, your presence. Then came the longing for who I was by your side. And now, what remains is a longing for what we were not, of the conversations we never had, of the plans that never came to fruition, of the kisses interrupted by misinterpreted silences. It's like crying for a life that only existed in the twists and turns of fate. time is cruel when it is full of space. It forces us to turn everything upside down, memory by memory, word for word, as if we were looking for clues as to what went wrong or how we can still continue loving, even without having anywhere else to send that love. Here in the cabin, I learned that time does not heal. It only rearranges. The pain doesn't go away, it settles. Like a box of old letters forgotten in the attic of the mind. With each passing night, longing takes on new forms. Sometimes, it's the sound of the wind that reminds me of you. Other times, it's the loneliness of the empty plate or the echo of my own sigh on the wood. Sometimes I wonder if you feel it too. When winter hits your window, does your body also shrink without knowing why? Are there nights when you wake up without remembering your dream, but with your heart aching for something it seems to have no name? Has your time also been extended, or did you learn to carry on? Here, I continue learning to live with slowness. Each gesture takes longer, each thought deeper. And maybe that's what time does when it gets thick. It forces us to look inside, facing longing head-on without distractions. I often sit in front of the window for long periods. I don't expect anything. I just let time envelop me like fog covers the fields. And on some days, just some days, this longing seems less painful, as if he was teaching me something, as if there were a kind of beauty in the persistence of memory. Time has shown me that longing doesn't have to be a burden. Sometimes it's the only way to remember that what we felt was real, that love existed, that it still exists even if without an address. And then I write. I write because as long as the words continue to flow, time does not devour me completely. I write because even if the ink dries, the echoes still remain. And maybe that echo, one day, will find you. I was never taught to admit that I was afraid. From a young age, I was expected to stand firm, to hold my chin high, to stare fixedly and determinedly as if the world could be faced with willpower and tensed muscles alone. I was trained for this, trained to resist, trained to obey, trained to be silent. But here, where there are no more orders to follow, no more eyes to watch, where only the wind answers me and only the cold touches me, I can finally confess I am scared, and sometimes it paralyzes me. It's not the fear of death that has visited me so many times that I've learned not to look it in the eye anymore. It's another kind of fear, more intimate, more invisible, slower. I'm afraid of oblivion. Fear that everything I've lived, everything I've felt, will dissolve like a bird's trail in the sky. May my existence become just a silence between two dates. I'm afraid you'll erase me, or worse, that I need to erase myself to continue. When night falls in this cabin and the wood smolders slowly, there is a feeling of invisibility that takes over me, as if I wasn't here anymore, but I wasn't anywhere else either. A kind of limbo where even feelings become opaque, cloudy. And in that space between what I am and what I pretend to be, my fragility lives. It's not easy to admit this. The uniform even. Now, hanging behind the door like an ancient ghost, still carries the weight of expectation. It was not made for men who cry. He was not made for broken hearts. But mine is. Since the day I left, it has broken into pieces too small to be glued back together with pride. Here inside, when the cracking of wood replaces the voices, I allow myself to feel. Sometimes I walk back and forth for no reason, as if my steps could fill the void that grows between the walls. Other times, I sit on the floor and look at the flame slowly dying, as if it were telling me what the silence insists on hiding, that not all war takes place on the battlefield. Some we fight alone, in the dark, against absence. I wanted to tell you this. I wanted you to know that, even with the uniform, even with the medals that may never come, I am made of the same fragile flesh as you. I wanted to tell you that there are nights when I hug my own body to feel that I'm still here. That there are times when doubt eats away at me more than any wound I received out there. Did I do the right thing by leaving? Was this really my path? Or was I just another person pushed by the fear of appearing weak? And now I pay the price of silence. I remember the last time I said everything was fine. You held my hand for a second longer than necessary, as if you realized it was. A lie. But he didn't say anything. He just nodded. And in that gesture, you forgave me for hiding from you that I was scared. Today, I realized that that fear was just the beginning. Now he has roots. It spread inside like a silent tree growing in. The dark, fed by distance and uncertainty. But you know, even though I'm scared, I'm still here. Even though I'm fragile, I still write. Because perhaps admitting one's vulnerability is a form of courage that the world has not taught us. I am a soldier, yes, but I'm not made of iron. I am made of memories, of doubts, of love, and the absence of it. I am made of everything that did not fit into the orders I received, of everything I left behind to try to protect an ideal that now seems increasingly distant to me. There are nights when I sleep little, wrapped in blankets that don't warm what really needs heat. And when I close my eyes, I see you, not as a perfect image, but as a light presence, sometimes just a whisper. Your absence is the only thing that remains constant. She is my shadow, my companion, my silent prayer. I wish you were here, not to save me, but to listen to me, to understand that even the most hardened men carry scared boys inside their chests, that there is a limit between resisting and letting go, and that the line between the two is thinner than I imagine. If you could see me now sitting by the fire, hands shaking, eyes wet, you might not recognize me. Or maybe only now he truly recognized me, because I am this one, not the soldier in the portraits, but the real man. What you feel, what you fail, what you hope for, what still loves, even when all seems lost. If one day this letter reaches you, even if it is old, even if it is late. Know that it is my confession, my surrender, not to an enemy, but to the truth I have so avoided. I am scared. I miss you. And I'm more fragile than I let you realize. But I'm still here, even if no one sees, even if no one knows. There is a kind of silence that only winter knows. It is a thick, almost living silence that covers everything like the white blanket that rests on the roof of the cabin. It is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of something deeper, as if even the noises knew that they must move delicately, respecting the space of time, of memory, of waiting. Mornings here don't start with alarm clocks or appointments. They are born with the creaking of wood under the weight of the fading night, with the sound of snow slowly running down the cracks in the roof, as if the sky itself was crying in silence. It's the creak of an old beam, the slow breathing of the wind in the windows, and the light sigh that escapes my chest when I realize that another day is repeating itself. The routine in this cabin is made up of small ceremonies. Upon waking, before the light has even spread completely, I sit on the edge of the bed and listen. I just listen. There are no human voices here, just the sounds of the house, which seem to speak to me in an ancient language made up of creaks, whispers, and long pauses. Sometimes I hear something like footsteps, but I know they're not. It's the wood moving, or maybe the memory of someone who once passed through here. Then I get up slowly. Each gesture is a ritual. I walk barefoot on the cold floor, and I feel under my feet the story of many other lives that perhaps also spent days waiting for something, or for someone. In this small kitchen, I prepare water that boils silently, releasing steam that dances in the dull morning light. I use an old kettle stained with time. It sings softly when ready, and that sound has somehow become my gentlest alarm. I drink the still hot tea, sitting by the window. Outside, the world is white, but not empty. The forest moves even when it seems still. The trees whisper to each other, swaying their branches like tired hands that still remember to hold. There is a strange comfort in repetition. Within it lies the silent hope that something will return, or that something changes, or that, even if nothing happens, at least I'll continue here, present, breathing. I spend a lot of time writing. My diary became a paper mirror. In it, I pour out thoughts that I dare not say out loud. Sometimes I write to you. Other times, I write just so I don't forget my own voice. Candlelight accompanies every word. It is a notebook with a worn cover, where the pages carry more than letters. They carry the weight of what was not said, of what was lost amid decisions, of what was suspended in time. Writing by candlelight is different, slower, more sincere. The shadow of the flame dances over the lines and seems to bring movement back to memories that seemed forgotten. In the afternoon, I usually go out to collect firewood. The trail that leads to the edge of the forest is already marked by my own footsteps. The snow crunches beneath my boots, a muffled, almost comforting sound, as if the ground is carefully welcoming each footprint. I collect dry branches, sometimes with eyes still stuck to them. I bring them back like someone who carries part of the soul of the forest into the house. The wood crackles when it touches the fire. It is a sound that cuts through the silence, but does not break it. It's yet another reminder that something still pulses, still breathes, even under the weight of the cold. As the afternoon dissolves into night, I light the candles, one by one, scattered around the house like tired little suns. They illuminate. More than walls, they reveal shadows. And in those shadows, sometimes I see you. Not clearly, but I feel your presence, as if you were sitting by the fireplace in silence, with your hands folded in your lap, as if time, for brief moments, bent to allow this impossible encounter. There is also reading. I found some old books on the shelf in the living room. Its yellowed pages carry the smell of dust and secrets. I read slowly, not for the pleasure of the story, but for the sound of the words being spoken, even if it's just inside my head. It's like listening to someone and for a moment, not being alone anymore. Sometimes I read it out loud, not for me, but for the house, for the absence, for you. At night, I lie on the small sofa near the fire. The thick blanket covers my body, but not the restlessness. I look up at the wooden ceiling, where the moonlight casts flickering shadows, and I listen. I always hear it, the sound of snow falling, the leaves moving outside, the knocking of a forgotten window, and the beating of my own heart, which insists on continuing. Routine saves me. She is the thread that still keeps me lucid to the world, to the idea that maybe, somewhere, someone still thinks of me, even if only for a few seconds. Even if it's you, when you close your eyes, feeling a tightness in your chest that you can't name. Every day here is the same and at the same time different, because each one carries a new nuance of silence, a distinct scent of longing, a different way to remember without hurting so much. The cabin, with its smell of damp wood and ancient silence, welcomes me. She doesn't demand, no charge. Just let me be, fragilely, silently, myself. And that, for now, is all I have. There are certain memories that are not lost with time. They don't fade, they don't fade, they don't dilute over the decades. On the contrary, they intensify. They become clearer the further away they are. And among all the memories that time could offer me, there is one that returns more often than the others. The summer that Anna taught me to swim. It was in a hidden lake on the outskirts of Bergen, a place that almost no one knew about, surrounded by tall trees that touched the sky, with waters so still they looked like mirrors. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old. She was only a year older, but she already seemed to know so much about the world. Anna has always been like this, a soul ahead of her time. I remember the sound of the cicadas that day, from the smell of leaves warmed by the sun, and her, hair down, her feet bare on the edge of the lake, reaching out to me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Trust me," she said, and I trusted. The water was cold. I was shaking more from fear than from the cold. But she was there, standing firm, smiling. Not with that big smile we give for photos, but with a calm smile, full of certainty, as if to say, everything will be okay. She held my hands tightly, dove in slowly, and pulled me along. For a few seconds, everything was silent. The sound of the world grew muffled, distant, just my heart beating fast and the echo of her voice in my memory. "Relax your arms. Don't be afraid. I'm here." And she was. It always has been. In my falls, in the fights at school, in the endless summers of childhood, in the games of hide and seek that we never wanted to end, Anna was my anchor, and at the same time, my freedom. After that day, I was never afraid of swimming again. But strangely enough, it was only when she was gone that I discovered what drowning really was. And it wasn't in water. Other memories emerged slowly, as if they were tiptoeing through my mind. I remember the garden behind her house. She liked to plant daisies. He said they were flowers that knew how to wait for the sun. We would spend hours there, she digging with her small, dirt-stained hands, me helping in the clumsy way that only a clumsy boy can be. "These flowers will grow even if we forget about them," she said. "Why?" I asked. "Because there are things that grow only with hope." At that time, I didn't understand. Today, I still try. There was also the tree where we built a wooden house. It was more like a bunch of poorly held together boards than a real house. But for us, it was a castle. It was the place where monsters could not enter, where we made childhood promises and wrote notes hidden under a loose tile. "When you grow up and go away, don't forget me," she once wrote, on a piece of paper folded in four with small, uncertain handwriting. I still have that ticket. It's among the pages of my diary, here in the cabin. Childhood with Anna was made up of small but eternal gestures. She had a curious way of observing the world, as if she knew everything was temporary, but still worth it. She stopped to listen to the wind in the trees. He spoke to the birds as if they understood. And he collected bottle caps, dried leaves, and impossible dreams. One rainy afternoon, we were trapped inside her grandfather's old shed. The storm was raging heavily, and the roof was leaking everywhere. Anna picked up 2 empty cans and began to beat them like drums. He invented a strange song without melody, without meaning, but with a laugh that filled everything with life. "If the world is going to fall apart out there, at least let's dance in here," she said. And we danced among toolboxes, pieces of wood and leaks. We danced like those who are not afraid of the end. At night, she liked to tell stories. He invented characters who lived in the clouds, or under the lake, or behind mirrors. He said that every person had a version of themselves, hidden in a secret place, a version that only appeared when we were alone, very quiet, almost asleep. Maybe it's this version of me that writes now. Maybe it's that part of me that never grew up, that never went to war, that never left the Bergen docks. And when I close my eyes, I can still see her running across the field, her hair dancing in the wind, her feet bare and her light dress fluttering behind her. She called. Me turning to the side and smiling, as if no time had passed. I wonder how many of these memories are true, and how many are just what I wish they had been. But it doesn't matter, because even invented memories have the power to heal. Even those born out of longing still manage to warm us. And of all the versions of me that lived, the one who lived, alongside Anna, in that childhood made of brief eternities, it's the only one that still makes me believe it's worth continuing. There is a silence that rests beyond stillness. It's not just the absence of sound. It is the absence of life. In the cabin, during the longest nights when not even the wind moves and the snow seems to hold its own breath, the silence becomes almost an entity, an invisible, dense presence that occupies the spaces between objects, the gaps in the boards, the corners of the chest. A silence that is not only heard, but felt, like a cold weight in the depths of the soul. I've been here for weeks, maybe months. The count was lost in the indistinct days. The wood crackles with ice, the candle dances hesitantly in the dim light, and the broken clock on the wall has long since stopped keeping time. And in this discord, only silence remains faithful. In the absence of human sound, the mind begins to invent. She fills the voids with echoes of memories. And often, what comes through is not my voice, it's hers. Sometimes I hear Anna's laughter, coming from outside. A light, shimmering sound, like running water. But when I open the door, all I find is snow. White, intact. No footprints. No trace. Without her. Other times, the laughter comes from within, as if she were sitting there, next to me, cross-legged on the floor, with her eyes fixed on the candle flame. I can almost see the outline of her face, shaped like the French head when she thought, or how he would put his hand on his chin when he was listening carefully. In the absence of voices, everything echoes louder inside me. Thoughts become sounds, memories, noises, and silences gain names. I remember the way she called my name, not in a hurry, not urgently, but as if savoring every syllable. I remember the laughter that escaped me when I tried to cook and got everything wrong. The sound of her breathing as she fell asleep on the train, her head resting on my shoulder. Now there are no trains. There are no cities. There are no steps. There are no voices. The absence is so great that the tinkling of a drop of water from melting ice becomes an event. A leaf brushing against the window sounds like a whisper. The crack of a log splitting sounds like an exclamation. and even the sound of my own body, my breathing, my heartbeat, the creaking of the chair seems to come from another world, another life. Sometimes I find myself talking to myself, not out of madness, but out of necessity, for fear of forgetting the sound of a sentence, of forgetting the cadence of a conversation, to forget the music of the human voice. And when I speak, it is not for myself, it's for her, as if somewhere between reality and dreams, between snow and time, Anna could still hear me. Do you remember this place? I ask the void. This is where we said the world was bigger than we could imagine. No one answers, but silence, that old companion, seems to understand. It molds itself to the rhythm of my longing, whispers back with the creaks of the cabin, with the subtle whistle of the wind passing through the cracks. The other day, I dreamed that I heard her singing, an old Norwegian song, one of those that mothers sing to their children before they go to sleep. In the dream, I was lying down and she was beside me, her fingers running through my hair, like the days when fear made me tremble during thunderstorms. Just sleep, everything will be fine. Just sleep, everything will be fine. I woke up with tears on my face, and the silence is thicker than ever. I think about how human sound is more than communication. It's an anchor, it's a mirror, it's ground. And without him, without the sound of another being breathing next to us, or walking around the house, or laughing softly at the end of a sentence, existence becomes ethereal, detached from the world, almost invisible. Sometimes I look out the window and see the world covered in snow and shadows. Everything so beautiful and so quiet, like a painting that no one else looks at, like a story forgotten before it was told. Anna used to say that silence was necessary, that he was the space between the notes that made the music make sense. But she never talked about the endless silence. This kind of silence that devours memories and turns time into an empty room, without windows, without doors. Still, there is something about him, something that forces me to keep listening, because from time to time, silence gives me something back, an ancient word, a hidden laugh, a dream fragment where Anna still walks barefoot on the snow and says, I'm here, still here, even if you don't hear me. And I take a deep breath, and I listen, as if every second of silence was a promise that her sound will one day return. Night falls slowly over the cabin, like a heavy, silent blanket covering the frozen forest around it. Snow accumulates on the windows, erasing the shapes of the landscape, while the sky is lost in a dark sea of shy stars. The fire in the fireplace has already turned to embers, its heat minimal, almost absent, as if everything in that space was suspended between the present and a memory that refuses to leave. I lie down, hoping that the weariness of the journey will sink me into a deep, a sleep that will take me away from the loneliness, the cold, the time that seems to stretch like a broken mirror. But that night, Sleep does not come with its usual gentleness. It comes in a hurry, with a subtle restlessness that grows until it invades every corner of my being. The eyes close, but shadows begin to dance on the threshold of consciousness, and the voices of the past, until then dormant, awaken. First comes a barely audible murmur, the whisper of the wind passing through the icy trees. Then the shape of a name, as if the air carries it with an urgency that cuts through the night like a thin blade. Jacob. Jacob, it's my voice, called by the wind. A voice that seems to come from far away, but that echoes with a painful clarity inside my chest. My body shivers, my skin is covered in cold sweat, and I open my eyes with difficulty. I am in the darkness of the cabin, alone with the shadow of the furniture, the remains of the flame that has already gone out. The sound of my own name still reverberates in my mind, as if the trees around me are trying to reach me, trying to pull me out of the precarious safety of this refuge. I sit on the edge of the bed, my heart racing, my hands shaking. I try to control my breathing, letting the cold winter air enter my nostrils and calm the storm inside me. But the silence is too heavy, and the absence of any human sound weighs me down like an anchor. I then remember what brought me here, of the letters I never delivered, of the words I never had the courage to say, from Anna, who I left behind, from the goodbye that was never said, and from the hug that still weighs on my soul. All of this now mixes with the fear that lurks in the darkness of the night, fueled by my own loneliness. I close my eyes again, trying to push away the images that have begun to take shape in my mind. I see Anna's face, illuminated by the dim light of a lantern, her eyes filled with silent hope and a sadness we could never explain. She smiles at me as if she knew I would leave, but that I would not give up on her. But even this precious memory quickly dissolves, giving way to scenes I don't want to see. Distant explosions, faces of comrades who are lost in the war, voices that have become just echoes in my memory. And worst of all, the insistent sound of the wind calling my name, as if it wanted to take me far away, to a place where there is no more pain, but also no more hope. I sit, wrapped in the worn blanket, trying to find an anchor in reality, a reason to stay grounded in the face of growing fear. But the nightmare isn't over yet. It's only just begun. In the darkness, I begin to hear other sounds, distant footsteps in the snow, shadows moving at the edge of the forest, the feeling that something or someone is watching. My body tenses. My mind struggles not to get lost in the labyrinth of thoughts. I try to remember Anna's last piece of advice. Even when fear comes, take a deep breath and remember what makes you strong. And so I breathe, slowly, deeply. But the call of the wind is still there, insistent, invading my dreams, pulling my soul to a place where the past and the present are confused, where the silence is broken by voices that should no longer exist. I close my eyes, waiting for the night to pass, for the sun to rise again, and for silent hope to return with it to warm my heart, frozen by fear and absence. The world outside was covered in a thick layer of snow, a pristine white that blotted out everything around the cabin. The cold bit my exposed skin, the air was sharp, and the deep silence seemed to seal the forest in an embrace of ice and solitude. But that morning, unlike so many others that had passed, something caught my attention. Something that seemed small, fragile, but that carried a silent force capable of breaking through the icy veil that surrounded me. As I left the cabin, stepping carefully through the raw snow, my eye was caught by an unexpected spot of color. Against the vast white, a flower. Stuck to the frozen ground, its petals trembled beneath a thin layer of ice, as if struggling to stay alive against the harshness of winter. It was a small, delicate wildflower that defied the season and the silence around it. I approached it slowly, almost in reverence, as if the sight were a rare gift, a message left by the world for me at that very moment. The flower seemed like a small glimmer of hope, a silent promise that life, even in the midst of the cruelest cold and the deepest darkness, still resisted, still persisted. In that moment, the flower stopped being just a frozen plant. It became a symbol, a sign that even when all seems lost, love and life find ways to survive. Through the snow, the loneliness, and the fear, there was something there that told me not to give up, to keep believing. I picked up the flower carefully, shielding it from the icy wind with my trembling hands. I felt a faint warmth rise inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time, a thin thread of hope beginning to take root in my heart. Maybe this was what Anna had always wanted to teach me, that even in the darkest of times, hope could blossom. I walked back into the cabin, the flower now tucked between the pages of my journal like a talisman, a silent reminder that I am not entirely alone. The winter outside remained relentless, but inside me, something was beginning to change. The frozen flower was more than a passing beauty. It was an invitation to believe that, despite the distance, the absence, and the time that insists on taking everything, there is still room for life, for love, for a new beginning. I closed my eyes, holding tight to that small hope, and let it illuminate the dark corners of my soul, where longing and fear used to live. The silence of the night was gone, and with it, the heavy darkness that covered the forest gave way to a faint, soft, almost sacred light. The sky still held remnants of the gloom, but it slowly took on delicate shades of orange and pink, announcing the sunrise. It was a different morning, one of those mornings when time seems to slow down, as if the whole world were holding its breath to contemplate a moment of pure beauty. I stepped out of the cabin, wrapped in the thick coat that was already beginning to soften with use, and my footsteps sank softly into the fresh snow. The air was cold, sharp, but at the same time, it seemed to contain a silent magic that filled my chest with a strange mixture of peace and melancholy. The sky, painted by an invisible brush, began to light up, and the white of the snow reflected this rising light with an almost silvery glow, as if the earth itself were covered by a blanket of fallen stars. Every flake that fell at that instant seemed to be made of crystal, delicate and ephemeral, dancing slowly as it touched the ground. I stood there for a long time, just watching. The first snowflake of the morning fell slowly, with almost impossible lightness, landing softly on the hood of my coat. It was as if the world had decided to give me a gift, a moment of silence and beauty in the midst of the chaos that surrounded me. The snow glistened under the first rays of sunlight, and I felt a twinge of hope take root in my heart. Even in the icy stillness of that isolated place, there was life, there was movement, there was a possible new beginning. Nature followed its course, indifferent to my pain and doubts, but also gentle in its silent way of comfort. As I walked, the sound of snow crunching beneath my feet was the only noise that accompanied my thoughts. The morning stillness was profound, almost reverent, and in the midst of it, I could hear, far away, the timid song of birds that, like me, were beginning to wake up. The sun continued to rise, spreading its golden light across the sky, and every snowflake, every crystal, seemed to absorb that glow, creating a tapestry of silver and gold that covered the entire forest. It was a silent spectacle, a subtle dance between light and shadow, cold and heat, life and absence. I took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air enter my lungs and renew every cell in my body. It was a moment of connection with myself, with the world, with everything I had left behind, and with everything I could yet become. In that moment, between the first snowflake and the sunrise, the loneliness seemed less heavy, the sadness less suffocating, and hope, though small and silent, began to grow like the frozen flower I had found days before, defying winter with its simple existence. I closed my eyes, letting the silvery morning light wash over my face, and for a brief moment, anything seemed possible. Sitting at the wooden table in the cabin, enveloped by the almost sacred silence that dominated the environment, I slowly opened the notebook where I had so often tried to transcribe my thoughts, my doubts, my memories. The flickering flame of the candle cast oscillating shadows on the yellowed pages, and there, in that small, protected space, my heart sought shelter and comfort. It was at that moment, when the loneliness seemed unbearable, that I allowed myself to imagine something almost impossible. What a letter written by Anna to me would be like, at this very moment, crossing time and space to reach me in this cabin, forgotten by the world. A letter full of words that she might never have the courage to say out loud, but that, deep down, she knew she needed to share. With a low voice, almost whispering, I began to read the words that my mind wove, as if they were true, written by her. My dear Jacob, if you are reading this letter, I want you to know that my heart is with you, even if the distance seems like an unbridgeable abyss. I know that winter is harsh, that silence can seem like a relentless enemy, but remember, even on the coldest of nights, there is a light that never goes out, the light of our love, which holds the promise of a reunion. When I think of you, I feel the warmth of our memories, that tight hug in the port of Bergen, the smell of the sea mixed with the perfume of your hands. I know that longing weighs heavily, that fear may try to infiltrate your nights, but please, resist. You are stronger than you imagine, and each day that passes is a step closer to a tomorrow where we will be together again. Don't blame yourself for what you can't control. Don't carry the weight of the world alone. I'm here, even if invisible, walking by your side, holding your hand through the wind and the distance. Allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to cry, but never let hope be lost in the cold. Take care of yourself, my love. Keep the strength in your soul, because I believe in you, and I know that one day these letters will be read not as goodbyes, but as promises fulfilled. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the tight lump in my throat, a mixture of sadness and comfort that invaded me completely. These words, although born of my imagination, had the power to calm the turmoil inside me. They reminded me that, despite everything, there was still an invisible thread that connected us, a silent hope that resisted absence and pain. I read the letter again quietly, repeating each sentence like a prayer, a mantra for my weary soul. It was as if, for a few minutes, Anna was there with me, whispering words of affection and courage, pushing away the shadows that insisted on approaching. That moment of reading transformed loneliness into companionship, sadness into tenderness, fear into strength. And even though that letter had never actually been written, it existed in my heart, alive and pulsating, ready to remind me, whenever I needed it, that I was not alone. Slowly, I put the notebook away, tucking the frozen flower back into the pages as a symbol of that hope that, even hidden beneath layers of ice and silence, continued to blossom within me. As the days dragged on in that isolated cabin, surrounded by the silent expanse of snow and forest, a growing shadow invaded my thoughts, a deep, almost silent fear that took root deep within me. It was the fear of disappearing, not just from the world, but from her memory. The fear that time, inexorable and merciless, could erase everything we were, everything we meant to each other. Sitting in the wooden chair, with the diary open on my lap, my hand trembled slightly as I tried to organize the words I didn't want to admit out loud. What if, while I'm here stuck in the past, fighting against the cold, against the silence, you, Anna, move on? What if your life goes on, even if slowly, while I become just a distant shadow, a dusty photograph forgotten in a drawer? The anguish of this possibility squeezed my chest tightly. The thought of being reduced to a mere memory, a face faded by time, a voice that no longer echoes, a name fading into oblivion, was more frightening than any battle I could face at the front. Because war, I thought, was a physical confrontation, a challenge of the body, but being forgotten was an invisible, cruel war that tore the soul apart. That night, the wind howled outside, creeping through the trees and knocking on the cabin windows as if it wanted to whisper secrets lost in time. I huddled close to the makeshift fireplace, the warmth of the flames the only resistance against the cold that tried to invade everything. But no physical warmth seemed able to dispel the chill that grew inside me, the deep loneliness mixed with cruel doubt. Will you move on, Anna? Will you find new joys, new promises? And I, what will I be to you when all this is over? These questions had no clear answers, only the emptiness that echoed in my mind. I needed to hold on to something, a word, a gesture, a memory to keep myself from sinking into that silent abyss. Then I remembered a moment as simple as it was. Eternal, the way Anna had looked at me before she left. Her eyes filled with a tenderness that, even from a distance, seemed to span centuries. It was this memory that gave me the strength to keep writing, to keep living in that frozen exile. But the pain of uncertainty remained. The fear of being forgotten wasn't just about her, it was about myself, about what would be left of me when the lights went out and the silence became final. Sometimes I felt like shouting to the wind, to the void, to the invisible world I inhabited, remember me. Don't let me disappear. But these words were lost in the cold air, returned only by the echo of my own tired voice. In the darkness of that cabin, surrounded by snow and isolation, I understood that this fear was not weakness. It was the most sincere proof of how much I loved, of how much I needed to be remembered in order to continue existing beyond absence. And even though I couldn't control what the future held, I decided that my memory wouldn't just be a dusty photograph. I would carry her with me, in the words I wrote, in the letters I never delivered, in the dreams I still dreamed. Because as long as there is memory, there is life. And where there is life, there is hope. In that white silence that filled every corner of the cabin, the weight of loneliness seemed almost palpable. The cold entered not only from the icy wind that blew outside, but from the absence of everything I had left behind, the absence of Anna's warmth, her voice, her laughter. It was a silence that weighed heavily, that tightened my chest, and that I tried to alleviate in the only way I could find, through music, through the memories that still echoed in the most intimate folds of my heart. I sat down by the small, fogged window, where the glass trembled in the wind, and in a low, almost timid voice, I began to hum an old song, the one she and I used to listen to in the days when we used to dance under the yellow light of an old lamp in the attic of her house. It was a simple melody, but full of meaning, made of soft notes and words that spoke of hope, of better days, of a love that withstood the storms. My voice cracked, trembling as if the air itself was too heavy to sustain the sound. Fear, doubt, the weight of absence manifested itself in each pause, in each longer sigh. Still, I continued. Because that song wasn't just a melody, it was a link, an invisible bridge that connected me to her, to a past that seemed increasingly distant and, at the same time, eternally present. As the notes trembled, I let myself be carried away by the feeling that invaded me, longing, deep and silent, but also a thin thread of hope. It was as if, with each word sung, I was trying to reach Anna, telling her that I was still here, that I still remembered, that I still believed. The snow fell outside, covering the world with its relentless calm, and inside the cabin, that song became a refuge from the crushing silence. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the moments when our bodies moved together, in sync with the music, even if clumsy, even if shy. I remembered the warmth of the embrace, the shy smile she gave me between the notes, and my heart tightened with the sweet and bitter mixture of the memory. My voice broke at several moments, broken by the emotion that threatened to overflow. Still, I continued to sing, murmuring the words with an almost reverent affection, as if this were the last song I could dedicate to her. Because, despite the fear, the loneliness, and the distance, that melody carried a simple truth. Love, even lost in time, never disappears completely. With each sentence, I felt something inside me calm down, the weight of abandonment lessening, even if only for a moment. It was as if, through music, I was able to speak without using words, to communicate what absence left voiceless. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant to the world, but to me, it was an anchor, a silent promise that I would not surrender to oblivion. As the last note faded into the cold morning air, I stood there, motionless, listening to the echo of the returning silence. The emptiness seemed less cruel, and hope, however faint, shone again in the darkness. And in that moment, however brief, I knew the song wasn't just mine, it was ours. An eternal reminder that even though we were separated by thousands of miles, and what seemed like endless time, our hearts could still find a way back to each other, through music, memory, and the silent love that would never cease to exist. Winter that day felt even colder, as if nature itself was holding its breath, aware of the tension permeating the air. The snow, which had previously fallen softly, now lay motionless on the branches of the trees, covering everything with a silent, almost reverent blanket. In that wooden cabin, isolated in the middle of the forest, I felt small in the face of the frozen vastness that surrounded me, and even more so in the face of the invisible danger that was approaching. It was a morning like so many others, but one that remained etched in my memory as if time had stopped. I was sitting by the fireplace, writing another letter to Anna, my hand trembling as I held the pen, when suddenly an absolute silence took over the room. Not the calm, welcoming silence that I had come to know, but a silence filled with expectation and fear. A silence that said something was coming. The distant sound of footsteps, light, almost muffled by the snow, began to slowly approach, like an ominous whisper. My heart raced, slamming against my ribs, nearly choking my breath. Every movement inside the cabin seemed amplified, as if I were under an invisible microscope, exposed to any sound that might give away my presence. The footsteps grew louder, low voices, indecipherable words, the distant crunch of boots on packed snow. They were enemy soldiers, roaming the forest, searching for any sign, any trace of resistance or refuge. I could feel their proximity without seeing them, like a dark shadow about to fall upon me. Without making the slightest noise, I swallowed hard and clung to the silence, trying to become part of the snow itself, the wood of the cabin, the emptiness around me. Each controlled breath was an exercise in patience and fear. I knew that, A single crack, a louder sigh, could mean the end of this precarious security. The minutes dragged on, eternal, as the soldiers approached the hut, their steps slowing, alert, almost hunting for something invisible. I could hear the creaking of doors in the distance, the voices growing closer, as if each syllable was a risk and imminent danger. I stood still, my body rigid, my eyes fixed on the locked door, waiting, praying that they wouldn't come in. Time seemed suspended between hope and despair, between life and death. And then, when danger seemed closer than ever, the soldiers turned around, walking slowly away, leaving behind only the echo of their boots in the snow. It was only after the sound had completely disappeared that I allowed my body to relax, the heavy air escaping my lungs in a long exhale. Relief mixed with adrenaline made my hands tremble, and my mind struggled to understand the luck that saved me at that moment. That day was marked not only by fear, but by the feeling that the fragility of my existence hung on the end of an invisible thread. Every second seemed like a gift stolen from fate, and the memory of that near encounter would accompany me silently and constantly in the days to come. At that moment, more than ever, I understood the importance of silence, not just the silence of the snow or the forest, but the silence that saves lives, that hides hearts and hopes. And as the snow continued to fall outside, covering everything in white, I whispered to myself a silent promise to continue, to endure, to remember. Because even on the brink of oblivion, even with death looming so close, there was still a flame dim, delicate, but still alive, that I would keep for Anna, for us, for what could still be. In the stillness of that cabin, with the shadows of the night stretching beyond the window, I found myself once again caught up in a thought that seemed to consume me. Why? Why war? Why did the world have to be torn apart by so much brutality, so much suffering, so much absence? I looked at the wall where, months ago, Anna had hung a small photo of us. We had been smiling young, full of dreams, completely unaware of the coming storm. Now, that smile felt like a reliquary of a lost time, a time that the war had ripped away from us, leaving behind only silence and distance. The sound of the cold wind whistled outside, while inside me a silent storm grew. War, I thought, was not just about battles and weapons. It was about broken hearts, about unfulfilled promises, about lives that had abruptly separated, like two rivers that once flowed together, now diverted by a gigantic stone. That night, I asked myself over and over again why there was so much pain, so many families torn apart, so many dreams shattered. Was it a struggle for power, for control? Or was it simply the inevitable human weakness, a dark shadow that falls over reason and compassion? I, a simple soldier hiding in an isolated cabin, felt small in the face of the immensity of the pain caused by those conflicts. I felt that the brutality of war was not only in the explosions, the gunshots, or the frost that froze the battlefields. It was also in the silence of those who remained, in the emptiness of letters never delivered, in the hopes that faded, like melting snow under the spring sun. I thought about Anna, her soft voice and the sparkle in her eyes, and the question kept repeating itself in my mind. Why this cruel distance, this invisible barrier that separated us? Why did I have to be here, hidden and afraid, while she continued to live her life so far away, perhaps wondering if I still existed somewhere? War seemed like a faceless monster, a force that understood neither reason nor mercy. I reflected on how much we were victims not just of those who wielded weapons, but of a system that turned lives into numbers, that turned people into forgotten statistics. There were days when I wondered if, somehow, all this pain had a purpose, if even in this darkness there was a light to be found, if the absence and regret I felt could be transformed into something worthwhile, a silent lesson in what truly matters. But that night, amid the crackling of the fire and the crackling of the wood, the only certainty I had was that brutality that war had stolen more than time and places. It had stolen pieces of us, of our souls, and left a void that was difficult to fill. It was a deep pain, an open wound that throbbed with every memory. And yet, even in that emptiness, something persisted. A silent, faint hope that whispered that one day, perhaps, all of this could be understood. That war, no matter how cruel, would not be able to erase the love I still held. So, in the shadows and the chill of the night, I closed my eyes and let these thoughts wash over me, not to find definitive answers, but to accept the complexity of what was beyond my reach. Because sometimes accepting uncertainty is the first step to finding peace. The soft crackling of the fire in the grate filled the cabin with a soft, welcoming light, casting shadows that danced slowly across the weathered wooden walls. I sat there alone, pen in hand and a piece of aged paper in front of me. The pen moved slowly, almost as if the weight of the words I needed to write made the movement painful, heavy. Words I had left unsaid, the ones trapped in the silence of time. I thought about Anna, about the immense distance that separated us, and the guilt squeezed my chest with a force that didn't let me breathe properly, like an invisible knot that tied me to memories and dragged me to a past where everything was still possible, where I could hug her, tell her everything she needed to hear. I should have told you that you were everything, I whispered to myself, like an intimate confession, a truth that had been hidden among the shadows of our farewell. I loved her silently, in a way that sometimes I didn't even fully understand. And now, in the solitude of the cabin, each unspoken word echoed like a ghost. There were so many times when I let the opportunity pass me by, moments when I thought I would have time, that tomorrow would be the right day to speak, to express what my heart held. But tomorrow never came, or when it did, I was too far away, caught up in a war that consumed not only bodies, but also hopes. I remembered that last embrace in the port of Bergen, the brief warmth before the cold of departure. In that moment, I didn't say everything. I didn't tell her how scared I was, how much she meant to me, how much I wanted this to be just a goodbye, not a goodbye. There was too much rush, voices all around, the noise of ships, and war required silence, required strength. But in that strength, vulnerability was set aside and regret then came to stay. Sometimes in the darkness of the night, when the wind howled outside, I wondered if she missed the words she never heard. If somewhere she imagined what I felt, or if everything was shrouded in silence and distance. I wished I could go back. In time, sit beside her and say calmly, with the sincerity that life steals from us, "You're everything to me, Anna, and I miss you with every beat of my heart." The pain of regret was not just for the words left unsaid, but for all the little things we didn't do together, for the dreams we left unfulfilled. It was the weight of lonely nights, of the letters that never reached her, of the promises that remained on paper in silence. Yet, as I wrote, I felt that even with the regret, there was a form of redemption in the simple courage of trying to express oneself, even if belatedly. Perhaps these words, however belated, could cross time and space, carrying the love I never spoke, the silent hope of a reunion that might never come. And so, with the pen trembling in my hands, I continued to write, filling the void with the truth of my heart, a heart that, despite everything, had not stopped loving, even in absence, even in distance. The snow continued to fall within, almost hypnotic serenity, enveloping the cabin in a white blanket that silently hid the world around it. Outside, everything seemed frozen in time-still trees, the gray sky, and the silent expanse of the forest covered in white. It was as if the world had closed in on itself in a frozen sigh, where past and present began to blend together in a slow, subtle dance. As my eyes wandered across the icy landscape through the fogged-up window, I began to notice something strange, almost imperceptible shadows moving softly between the tree trunks, silhouettes appearing and disappearing as gently as snowflakes fell. Were they delusions, the fruits of the loneliness that lodged within me? Or were they memories coming to life in the icy silence of the night? It was hard to tell where reality ended and memory began. The silhouettes seemed to form faces, faint figures that took shape and disappeared into the darkness. Amidst those shadows, I could vaguely recognize Anna's form, her fragile, familiar figure, the curve of her shoulders, the way she walked. Through the fields, my heart sank and a sigh escaped my lips, almost soundless, like a whisper trying to reach her through time. These ethereal apparitions carried with them the lightness and sadness of something that could no longer be touched, but still remained there, firm in my mind. It was her presence in my isolation, a silent companion that visited me on cold nights when the wind seemed to carry her distant voice between the trees. But at the same time, there was something unsettling about these visions. They were shadows. That reminded me of what I had lost, of the insurmountable distance that now separated us. They were like distorted echoes of what was once real, fragments of a past that insisted on repeating itself, albeit painfully. The cold seemed to intensify the clarity of these images. I saw them approaching, hesitating between the real and the imaginary, between hope and despair. My heart oscillated between the desire to embrace those figures and the fear that they were just ghosts, inventions of my tired mind. In one of those moments, I felt almost as if Anna was there, beside me, her soft touch on my cold skin, a breath of warmth in the middle of winter. The feeling was so intense that I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to that presence for a few more seconds, wanting to believe that time could be doubled, that distance could be overcome. But when I opened my eyes again, the silhouettes had disappeared, leaving only the silently falling snow, covering the earth with its impassive mantle. And in that emptiness, loneliness and melancholy remained, mixed with a fragile hope, the hope that even in the coldest and most silent nights, the memory of love could manifest itself as a faint light, guiding the way through the darkness. At that moment, I realized that perhaps these visions were more than just illusions. They were manifestations of what the body could no longer feel, but which the spirit insisted on keeping alive. The eternal presence of those we love, even if only in the shadows of snow and silence. The silence in the cabin seemed heavier then. Night, the snow outside covered everything in silent purity, and I sat again at that old wooden table, with my heart heavy and my mind filled with a mixture of hope and fear. The words that had already been written, the first letter addressed to Anna, lay on the table, carrying the weight of everything I had not been able to say until then. But that night, I felt like I needed to write something different, something that was more than a memory, more than a confession. I needed to make promises, promises that would last through time, that would live on even if I didn't come back to tell her in person. I picked up a fresh piece of paper, clean and white, as the snow outside. The pen felt lighter this time, but each word still carried a deep emotion, an almost desperate desire for connection, to leave something that could not be erased by distance or the silence of war. Dear Anna, I began to write, the voice in my head quiet, almost a whisper, as if it were speaking to her in her ear. If you are reading this letter, it means that winter has come again, and I may not have been able to return to you. Paper seemed to absorb my words, as if it wanted to forever store those promises that I needed to leave behind. I continued, trying to be firm, but at the same time gentle, as if each sentence was a caress, an attempt to calm her heart, to prepare her spirit for what might come. I promise that, wherever I am, I will be thinking of you, of our days together, the sound of your laughter, the warmth of your embrace. I promise that my love for you is stronger than the cold that surrounds me, that no distance can erase what we feel. The words flowed slowly, almost like a silent chant filling the cabin. I wanted those promises to be like an anchor, an invisible bond between us that could withstand the storms of war and time. If I don't come back, I continued, I want you to read this letter only next winter. I want you to keep it until the snow falls again and you can feel, if only for a moment, that I am there with you. Under the same moon and the same sky, as I wrote, I felt the weight of what I was leaving behind, but also a strange sense of peace. It was as if, by putting my promises on paper, I was creating a bridge between the present and the future, between the solitude of the cabin and her presence somewhere far away. The night wore on slowly, and the candlelight cast long, soft shadows on the walls. Each word was chosen carefully, as if they were seeds of hope planted in the ice, waiting to bloom when time permitted. I ended the letter with one last sigh, almost as if I was committing my broken heart to the paper. I love you, Anna. I always will. And if this is my last promise, may it be a beacon for you in your darkest nights. I carefully kept the letter inside the envelope, as if protecting a precious treasure. I put it in my coat pocket, close to my chest, so that I could feel its weight and its meaning with every beat of my heart. It would stay there, waiting, perhaps never to be read again. Or perhaps to be discovered in a future where winter brings back not only snow, but also the memory of what we were and what we could still be, even in the shadows of the past. The cold air that entered through the cracks in the cabin seemed to grow heavier and heavier, carrying a subtle odor of fatigue and fragility. My hands, once steady, trembled slightly on the paper as I tried to organize my thoughts, as if the fog in my mind was increasing, making it difficult to hold the clarity necessary to write. My body was beginning to show signs of tiredness. That wouldn't go away. A fever that came and went, a slight, persistent pain, as if the snow falling outside had infiltrated my bones. I felt that my time there was dwindling, that cabin, silent and protected, would be the last refuge before the inevitable. I sat at the table once more, lit only by the flickering candle flame that cast dancing shadows across the wooden walls. The words that came to mind were not just memories, but silent prayers, small goodbyes hidden between phrases full of emotion. Anna, I began, my voice barely a whisper inside my chest. If this is the moment when time calls me to leave, I want you to know that I lived with you in my heart, even when silence seemed to fill every space. Each word was an attempt to calm my own fear, a way to prepare my soul for what was to come. I wrote as if I were leaving a legacy, a final thread of connection between us, a whispered promise that would pierce the veil of time. Do not be afraid for me, I continued, for even as my body weakens, my mind remains firm in the memory of your smile, in the warmth of your gaze. You are my sunshine in the darkest nights, my silent hope when all seemed lost. As I wrote, the feeling of loneliness became almost palpable. But it wasn't a bitter loneliness, it was a deep, almost sacred stillness, as if every beat of my heart was synchronized with the pulse of the earth outside, covered in relentless snow. The thought of goodbye approached slowly, with the delicacy of a sigh, not like a scream. I knew I couldn't control what would come, but I wanted to make it clear to myself and to her that goodbye wasn't the end of our story. It was just a pause, a space between pages that would one day be read again. With each sentence, I felt my breathing slow down, as if the air around me was trying to calm me, to prepare my body for the inevitable rest. I wrote with a melancholic serenity, intertwining fear and hope, longing and love, as if each word were a delicate thread intertwining my soul with hers. If I leave before dawn, remember that my love does not die with the body. It lives in every snowflake, in every breath of wind, in every shadow that dances on the trees. I let the pen rest for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. The candle flickered, and I could hear, in the distance, the silence of the forest that embraced me, as if everything around me recognized its silent farewell. The feeling that something inside me was slipping away was real, but the love I carried remained intact, pure, a faint light that I hoped could guide an even in the darkness. I knew that those letters, those words left behind, would be more than a record of my existence. They would be an embrace, a promise, a voice that would continue to whisper amid the icy winds of that winter, keeping silent hope alive. And so I wrote, breathing slowly, preparing my spirit for the end, but holding firmly, until the last moment, the flame of love that could not be extinguished. The candlelight flickered delicately, casting long, soft shadows across the rustic walls of the cabin. The silence that dominated the place was almost palpable, as if time had slowed down, awaiting my every move with a patience I had never experienced before. My hands, now weak and trembling, held the pen with difficulty. Each gesture of writing was a battle against the body that insisted on giving in. The cold outside was bitter, and the wind blew through the trees of the forest, whispering ancient stories as if trying to reach me through the cracks in the wood. Inside the cabin, the world seemed suspended, like a sigh caught between the past and the present. I stared at the paper before me, where the words had already been carefully drawn letters not just of paper, but of soul, true pieces of my heart exposed in ink. Quiet hope permeated every line, even though the weight of absence and regret was inescapable. My hands hesitated. What would be the last sentence? How could I sum up everything I felt? Everything I hadn't said, everything I wanted her to know. A sigh escaped my dry lips. I felt the tears, invisible in the dim light, slowly fall as my mind traveled to Helena, her soft face illuminated by the sunlight, her smile that seemed capable of warming the harshest winters. So, with tremendous effort, tracing each letter, as if it were the last thing I could do, I wrote the words that had to be said. Words that I wanted to reach her, even if my body could no longer follow them. Always yours, even if time separates us. My heart felt like it wanted to explode in my chest, and at the same time, a deep calm invaded me. It was a silent goodbye, an eternal promise that transcended time, space, and even death. The uncertainty of the future no longer had power before the strength of those words. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling my skin crawl as I heard the distant rustling of leaves, the crack of ice breaking under the weight of winter. But inside the cabin, that small piece of paper was like a beacon in the darkness, a testament to what could never be forgotten. As my hand rested on the text, I realized that despite the fear, pain, and the loneliness, there was still something that remained intact, the silent hope, that faint light that does not go out, even when all seems lost. I remembered the many nights Anna and I had stayed up talking, planning a future that had seemed so far away at the time, but now seemed so impossible. The memory of the warmth of her embrace, the softness of her voice, filled me with an almost physical longing, as if I could feel her presence there with me in that solitary moment. I knew that even if I never delivered these letters, they carried the weight of everything I had felt. They were bridges across distance, across silence, across death, little lights lit in the darkest winter. The pen glided slowly, tracing the last lines of that sentence, which for me had the meaning of an eternity, always yours, even if time separates us. My heart was beating slowly, with a serenity I had never known. My tired hand rested on the paper, and a last sigh escaped my lips, almost inaudible, lost in the silence of the night. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if there would be a dawn for me. But in that moment, in that frozen patch of time in the Bergen winter, I found the peace that came from knowing that true love transcends all. The shadows continued to dance on the walls, while the candle, almost gone, cast a soft light, protecting that last sentence, that last whisper. And so, in that cabin forgotten by time, a man wrote his goodbye, not with sadness, but with the serenity of someone who knows that love remains even if time, destiny, and even death try to separate them. Decades had passed since that harsh winter of 1943, when the soldier had written his letters in the silent, forgotten hut in the forests near Bergen. The world had changed. The seasons had passed countless times. The trees had grown and bent, and the snow that had once covered everything in white had become a memory. The marks of time had begun to fade from this remote place, where silence and cold held ancient secrets. In the year 2025, the landscape around the cabin seemed both familiar and strangely distant. The wind still whispered through the trees. The leaves still moved softly, but something new had caught the eye of a lone traveler. He walked slowly along the trail, his footsteps soft on the damp earth, his gaze attentive to the details around him. He was a curious man, driven by the quiet search for ancient stories, for traces of the past that still echoed in the tranquility of the present. He was someone who found comfort in small discoveries and memories that time had almost buried. The nature around him seemed to whisper secrets, inviting him to uncover something forgotten. When he reached the cabin, the traveler felt a deep calm invade his being. The worn wood, the moss-covered roof, the windows fogged with time, everything seemed to tell a silent story, a testament to the passage of time and the lives that had passed there. He entered carefully, feeling the cool, still air envelop. His senses, his eyes began to roam over the old wooden floor, the boards creaking under his weight. It was then that something caught his attention, a slightly loose board, slightly displaced from where it should have been. There was something strange there, a detail that seemed out of time, like a secret waiting to be revealed. Gently, he lifted the board, revealing a small hidden space, a secret cavity beneath the floor. The traveler's heart quickened slightly, for he knew he had found something precious. There, carefully folded, lay a letter yellowed with age, its surface marked, with wrinkles and stains that told stories of hands that had held it long ago. He took the letter reverently, feeling the weight of history in his hands. The ancient letters, written in delicate calligraphy, were still legible, carrying a mystery and emotion that transcended the decades. That piece of paper was a link between the past and the present, a voice that crossed time to speak to whoever had the patience to listen. The traveler sat on the cold floor of the cabin, the letter resting on his lap, and began to read slowly. Each word seemed to pulse with the emotion of the man who had written it. Each sentence carried a weight of longing, of hope, and of lost love. He felt as if he were entering the soul of that soldier, sharing his fears, his silent hopes, his farewells that were never delivered. The silence of the cabin, which had previously seemed empty and cold, was now filled with an invisible presence, the presence of living memory, of the story of a man who had refused to be forgotten, who had left his heart open on paper so that someone, one day, might find it and understand his pain and his hope. Outside, the wind continued to whisper. The snow might have melted long ago, but there, inside that cabin, amidst the stillness of the decades, the letter was a light that shone in the darkness of time, connecting hearts separated by generations. The traveler held the letter close to his chest, feeling a mixture of sadness and admiration. It was as if he had found a treasure that spoke of the fragility and strength of human beings, the eternity of love, and the inevitability of absence. As the sun began to set, tinting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink, he knew that this discovery was not just an encounter with the past, it was a call to keep memory alive, to give voice to those who have been silenced by time and silence. And so, in the serenity of that afternoon, enveloped by the stillness of the forest and the weight of untold stories, the traveler prepared to share that lost fragment of the past with the world, bringing to light the letter that winter had kept for so long. The traveler held the letter between his hands, the thin, aged paper touching his fingers delicately, almost as if it were a sacred object, a relic charged with life and memory. The silence around the cabin seemed to amplify the calm breathing, and the small sounds of the environment, the distant rustling of the trees, the occasional crack of wood under the intense cold that still enveloped the forest. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to connect with the soul of the one who had written those words many years before. He felt the weight of time and distance dissolving in that moment, as if the voice from the past could cross the centuries and reach his heart. In a low, calm voice, almost a whisper, he began to read the letter. Each word was pronounced with an almost religious reverence, as if he were revealing a deep confidence, a secret kept with care and affection. Dear Anna, he began, his voice firm and calm. Today winter covers Bergen with its white mantle, and I find myself here, far from you, in a cabin where silence is my companion and solitude my only friend. As the words flowed, the atmosphere around seemed to change. The air was heavy with memories, The shadows on the walls came alive, as if time was folding its own folds, bringing echoes from a distant past. It was as if, for a few moments, the soldier's presence was felt there, as alive as the snow that covered the ground outside. The reading continued slowly, full of contained emotion, of longing that almost overflowed from those carefully written lines. The traveler felt every feeling, the poignant absence, the veiled fear, the silent regret that permeated each sentence. I remember our last embrace at the port, Anna. Your face in the mist of dawn, your scent that still seems engraved on my skin. I wish I had held you longer, promised you that I would return. But time betrayed us, and here I am, writing to you as if this letter could cross the sea and the silence. The wind outside seemed to respond, whispering through the cracks in the cabin, carrying the words to where the traveler could not reach, and yet he felt the weight of those emotions, like an invisible chain that connected past and present. As he continued to read, the details of the soldier's memories, the confessions of his fears, and the silent hope he kept alive even in the midst of darkness, took shape before the traveler's eyes, painting an emotional landscape as intense as any real scene. Each sentence was a stone thrown into the calm waters of the soul, causing gentle ripples that slowly spread, making the traveler reflect on the fragility of life, the power of words, and the invisible force that keeps us connected despite distances. And time. If I don't come back, Anna, I want you to keep this letter until next winter. Read it then, when the snow covers Bergen again, and the cold winds sing to you. Know that, even from a distance, I am always with you, in every snowflake, in every silence, in every star that shines in the sky of our city. The traveler's voice broke for a moment, a slight tremor betraying the depth of emotion that the reading aroused. He closed his eyes, imagining the woman who had received those words, the loneliness that surrounded them, and the courage contained in each line. Time seemed suspended in that instant, an open portal between two worlds, where the voices of the past merged with the present, creating a delicate and melancholic harmony. The sound of the ancient words, spoken with care and respect, echoed softly, like a chant that soothed the soul and filled the heart with silent hope. Outside, the forest continued its slow, eternal rhythm. The light dimmed, casting soft shades of dusk through the dusty windows. The traveler continued reading, the letter becoming a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that even in the deepest absences, love and memory remain serene, untouched, eternal. He knew that reading was more than just deciphering words. It was an act of connection, of respect, of acknowledging a story that had withstood time and distance, waiting patiently to be heard, understood, and finally remembered. As the last word was spoken, a deep silence once again filled the cabin. The traveler carefully closed the letter, feeling the delicate weight of that piece of paper, which carried more than ink. It carried lives, promises, and a silent hope that had withstood the passage of time. He stood there, motionless, enveloped by the stillness of the snowy forest, the world around him so calm, almost as if all of nature was in reverence for those stories never delivered, but never forgotten. The snow continued to fall slowly, gently, covering the ground, the trees, the roof of the cabin, as if it also wanted to keep its secret. At that moment, the traveler understood something that words alone could not explain, that some messages, even if never sent, continue to wander through time and space, searching for the right heart where they can rest, be understood, felt. Some words, even if never delivered. Keep walking through the snow, he whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, and sometimes find the right heart to rest in. He imagined Anna, waiting patiently for the return that might never come, and the soldier, who in the solitude of his hut wrote not only for her, but for the future, for the echo of a love that transcended war, fear, and distance. The letter, now in his hands, was like an invisible link, a delicate bridge between worlds and times. And in that simple gesture of reading it aloud, the traveler had, in a way, become the guardian of that story, a guardian of memory, of love, and of the silent hope that endured even in the darkest moments. He knew that that moment was not an end, but a cycle that closed to begin again. The letter would rest there, safe, until another day, another soul with an open heart could find it and feel once again the power of words never delivered. The wind blew softly through the forest again, carrying with it a sigh, almost a whisper that mixed with the sound of falling snow. A sound that seemed to say that, despite everything, love never disappears, it only changes its form, walking along. Invisible trails, waiting to be rediscovered. With one last look at the letter, the traveler stood up, leaving the cabin and the story behind, but taking with him a deep certainty that as long as there is someone willing to listen, the voices of the past will continue to live, eternal and serene, like snowflakes gently gliding until they find the place where your heart can rest. And so, the story that began in Bergen, that winter of 1943, continued on its path immortal, silent, and forever intertwined with time, love, and longing. If you felt the emotion of these undelivered words, get ready for the next chapters of this series, where other forgotten letters will reveal secrets, memories, and hopes that span time. Follow us, because each story brings a new journey into silence, feeling, and longing. Thank you for being here, for listening and allowing these voices from the past to find a place in your heart. Now, close your eyes calmly, take a deep breath, and let this serenity invade your sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be as light as the snow that falls softly over Bergen.